He left a pile of money exposed just to see how far she would go. But she ignored the fortune and went straight to what no one dared to touch. And since then, neither of them could escape that touch anymore. If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave your comment saying where you listen from. High in the Blue Ridge Mountains, isolated among dense forest and mists rising from Richmond, stands Willow Creek Estate, an ancestral property where time seems to have stagnated along with the memories of the Morgan family. The colonial construction, with its stone walls and endless corridors, houses the last heir of the coffee empire that dominated the Virginia interior for generations. Ethan Morgan, at 32, is a man who traded the mirrored offices of Richmond's financial district and the high society salons for a dark and silent existence, dedicated to slow self-destruction and mental games that only he understands. He carries on his shoulders a guilt that has consumed him for more than 10 years. The death of his twin sister Abigail, who tragically died in circumstances that were never fully clarified. One December night in 2013, during a New Year's Eve party at the estate, Abigail was found at the bottom of the property's artificial lake. The official report called it an accident, but Ethan never forgot what he saw that night. He never played the piano again, an instrument he had shared with his sister since childhood. He never allowed anyone to enter her room, preserved exactly as it was on the night of the tragedy, and he never touched the crystal reliquary that holds the graduation ring Abigail wore, a simple piece with a now opaque stone, but to him, sacred, untouchable, as if it contained the very soul of the house. Since then, Ethan has nurtured a dark theory that governs every decision in his life, that everyone is corruptible, that love is merely a disguise for financial interest, that no virtue resists the temptation of the money he inherited. To confirm this bitter belief, he spent years observing and testing employees, seducing women from high society only to reject them the moment they declared themselves, manipulating people like chess pieces on his private board of cynicism. He transformed the estate into a laboratory of human behavior, where each new employee becomes an unconscious experiment of his pathological distrust. The property, which was once the stage for memorable soirees and parties, now echoes only with the sound of his solitary footsteps along the marble corridors. The old employees were dismissed one by one, replaced by temporary staff from specialized agencies, people without emotional ties, without curiosity about the family's past, without interest in creating bonds. Ethan prefers it this way: functional, transitory relationships that he can interrupt before any genuine feeling threatens his certainties about human nature. But fate, or perhaps the house itself, seems to conspire against his convictions. In March 2024, when the first autumn rains begin to lash the windows of the estate, life sends him a piece that doesn't fit into any of his calculated logic. The human resources agency that provides temporary personnel for the property calls on a grey morning, informing him that the current housekeeper needed to take leave for medical reasons. In her place, they sent a substitute to cover the period of absence, Charlotte. Charlotte Sullivan, 23 years old, fatherless since she was 5, raised by a sick grandmother in a forgotten small town in the interior of West Virginia. Light brunette of medium height, with brown eyes that seem to hold more secrets than they reveal, and a contained, almost monastic behavior. Her professional references are impeccable, but her personal history is curiously lacunar, as if her life had only begun at 18 when she moved to Richmond in search of work. She arrives on a rainy afternoon, driving a battered white Corsa, with only 2 suitcases of simple clothes and a small toiletry bag. Ethan observes her from the office window as she stops the car in front of the main entrance, hesitating for a few seconds before getting out, as if gathering courage. There is something in her movements that intrigues him. She doesn't show the typical intimidation of someone visiting such a property for the first time. Instead, her eyes scan the facade of the house with a strange familiarity, almost nostalgic. When Charlotte finally rings the doorbell, Ethan comes down personally to receive her, something he hasn't done in years. She introduces herself with a low voice, eyes fixed on the ground, but when she finally looks at him, he feels an impact he can't explain. There is something in that face that awakens a disturbing sense of déjà vu. As if he had seen her before in dreams or nightmares he preferred to forget. Ethan decides at that very moment that she will be his next experiment. But unlike the others, Charlotte will be subjected to the definitive test, the one he reserves. 4 special cases. He quickly explains the rules of the house, shows the rooms she will be authorized to clean, and accompanies her to the employees' quarters at the back of the property. During the journey, he studies her discreetly, looking for revealing signs of greed, envy, or falsity. But Charlotte walks beside him in silence with downcast eyes, as if fulfilling a penance. As night falls, after she has already settled in and begun her activities, Ethan puts his strategy into practice. He deliberately leaves a considerable amount of money in plain sight in his office, $20,000 in $100 bills, casually scattered on the desk, right next to the locked reliquary that holds Abigail's ring. He installs hidden cameras in the corners of the room and withdraws, waiting for the moment when human nature will reveal itself in its crudest form. For 3 days, Ethan monitors Charlotte through the cameras installed in his office. She enters punctually at 9 in the morning to clean, always with the same economical and precise movements. She dusts the furniture without rushing, arranges the books carefully, cleans the window glass with an almost reverent dedication. But the money remains untouched on the desk. She passes beside the notes as if they were part of the decoration, showing no interest or even curiosity. What she does, however, is something completely unexpected. On the 3rd day, Ethan sees her approach the crystal reliquary where Abigail's ring rests. Charlotte stops in front of it for a few seconds, and then, with a delicacy that borders on the sacred, touches the dusty glass with her fingertips. It's not a casual or curious touch. It's a gesture of recognition, almost like someone asking forgiveness from the dead. She closes her eyes for a moment, whispers something inaudible, and continues her cleaning as if nothing had happened. This seemingly harmless gesture triggers something violent inside Ethan. Forgotten memories explode in his mind like shrapnel. Abigail at 17, polishing her own ring with the same delicacy. Abigail touching the piano keys with those same cautious fingers. Abigail whispering secrets in his ear on nights of shared insomnia. The pain, petrified for more than 10 years, begins to crack, releasing sensations he swore never to allow again. And in doing so, Charlotte plants a seed of obsession that he cannot uproot. Restless and deeply disturbed, Ethan decides to confront her directly. The next morning, he waits for her in the office, seated in his leather armchair, with the money still scattered on the desk. When Charlotte enters with her bucket and cleaning cloths, he doesn't move. He just observes her in silence, like a predator studying its prey. She immediately notices his presence, but shows no surprise or embarrassment. She just makes a slight bow with her head and asks in a low voice, "Would you like me to come back later, Mr. Ethan?" The formality in her voice irritates him. He rises slowly, walks to the desk, and picks up one of the $100 bills. "Did you see this here?" he asks, waving the money in front of her eyes. Charlotte looks at him for the first time since arriving at the estate. Her brown eyes are calm, almost indifferent. "Yes, I did," she responds. "And why didn't you take it?" "No one would know." Ethan expects to see signs of nervousness, indignation, or deceit. But Charlotte merely shrugs and says, "Because it's not mine." The brutal simplicity of the answer completely disarms him. Ethan tries a new, more aggressive approach. "Do you know how much money is on this desk? It's more than you make in 2 years. Charlotte stares at him without blinking. "I know how to count, Mr. Ethan." There is something in her voice that is neither submission nor arrogance. It's a serene firmness that he has never encountered in anyone. Ethan feels a strange mixture of frustration and fascination. She doesn't fit into any of his behavioral patterns. Changing his strategy, he points to the reliquary. "And that over there? You touched it yesterday." For the first time, Charlotte shows a genuine reaction. Her cheeks blush slightly, and she lowers her eyes. "I apologize. I shouldn't have done that." The sudden vulnerability in her voice awakens something dangerous in Ethan. "Why did you do it?" he insists, coming closer. Charlotte hesitates, as if weighing her words. "It seemed familiar," she finally murmurs. "As if I had seen it before." The response hits Ethan like a punch to the stomach. He instinctively steps back, his heart racing. How could she have seen Abigail's ring? How could she know something that had been locked in that reliquary for more than 10 years? The suspicions he had been nurturing since her arrival begin to take shape. There is something very wrong with Charlotte Sullivan, something that goes beyond her lacuna references and enigmatic behavior. That night, Ethan cannot sleep. He walks the corridors of the estate like a ghost, mentally reviewing every word of his conversation with Charlotte. For the first time in years, he enters Abigail's room. The environment remains exactly as she left it: the Maid bed, the medical books organized on the shelf, the sheet music scattered over the grand piano that dominated one corner of the room. Ethan approaches the instrument and touches a key at random. The sound echoes through the silent room like a lament. It's then that he sees it. On the piano, next to a Chopin score, there's a photograph he doesn't remember having seen before. In the image, Abigail appears next to an older woman with brown hair and a shy smile. The two are in front of the main house of the estate, and the woman holds in her arms a small child, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, a girl with big eyes and curly hair who looks directly at the camera with an expression too serious for her age. Ethan picks up the photograph with trembling hands. On the back, in Abigail's delicate handwriting, is written, "Helen, Margaret and Charlotte, December 2005. The name hits Ethan like a devastating revelation. Charlotte. The girl in the photograph is Charlotte. But how is that possible? What connection did his family have with a child from the interior of West Virginia? And who are Helen and Margaret? For the first time in years, Ethan feels fear, not the calculated fear of his mental games, but a primitive and visceral terror. Charlotte is not a stranger who arrived by chance at his estate. She knows his family, she knows his history, and even more disturbing, she knew who he was when she decided to come work there. The question that haunts him for the rest of the night is devastating in its simplicity. If Charlotte knew all this from the beginning, what is the true reason for her presence at Willow Creek Estate? The next day, Ethan makes a decision that will change the course of their lives forever. He will discover who Charlotte Sullivan is, whatever it takes. And when he finds the answers he seeks, perhaps he'll also discover truths about himself that he would prefer never to know. The hunt has begun, but he still doesn't know if he's the predator or the prey. Ethan spends the following days immersed in a silent and obsessive investigation into Charlotte's past. He locks himself in his office with piles of old family documents, employee records, yellowed photographs, and even his parents' personal diaries. Each examined paper is a desperate attempt to decipher the enigma that Charlotte represents. He discreetly hires a private investigator from Richmond, a man specialized in delicate cases of high society, to track down Charlotte Sullivan's true story. While waiting for the results of the investigation, Ethan observes Charlotte with an intensity that borders on paranoia. He notices details that previously went unnoticed, the way she walks through the corridors of the estate, without hesitation, as if she knew every step and every curve, the way her eyes linger on certain family photographs hanging on the walls, especially those where Abigail appears, and mainly the strange familiarity with which she treats personal objects that should be completely unknown to a temporary employee. What disturbs him most is her reaction to Abigail's piano. Every time Charlotte cleans the music room, she approaches the instrument with an almost religious reverence. Ethan catches her several times, passing her fingers over the keys without producing sound, as if remembering something lost in time. On one of these occasions, he hears her whisper to herself, "Forgive me, Abigail. I tried to come back sooner." The words hit Ethan like lightning. How can Charlotte speak to his dead sister as if she knew her personally? The situation becomes even more disturbing when Charlotte begins to demonstrate knowledge that a simple housekeeper shouldn't possess. During dinner, which they share in silence in the kitchen, since Ethan has dismissed all other employees, she casually comments about the recipe for the cornbread she's serving. Miss Helen always said that the secret was in sifting the flour. 3 times. Ethan almost chokes on his own wine. Helen was the name of the family cook during his childhood and adolescence, a woman who worked on the estate for more than 20 years and died when he was 17. "How do you know about Miss Helen?" asks Ethan, trying to keep his voice casual. Charlotte stops eating and looks at him with that serene expression that so disconcerts him. "My grandmother taught me this recipe. She said she learned it from a friend who worked at a rich estate in Virginia." The answer is plausible, but there's something in the way she pronounces the name Helen that suggests a greater intimacy than a recipe transmitted secondhand. The tension between them intensifies each day. Ethan finds himself waking in the middle of the night, tormented by dreams where Charlotte and Abigail blend into a single figure that sometimes accuses him, sometimes seduces him. During the day, he fights against a growing and disturbing desire to touch her, to force her to reveal her secrets through physical proximity. But every time he gets too close, Charlotte retreats with a naturalness that doesn't seem studied, as if she knew exactly how far she could go without awakening his darker side. The private investigator's report arrives on an April morning when the typical fine drizzle of Virginia autumn transforms the estate's landscape into a faded watercolor. Ethan opens the thick envelope with trembling hands, prepared to discover truths that could change everything. What he reads leaves him simultaneously relieved and terrified. Charlotte Sullivan really exists in official records, was born in Oak Ridge, interior of West Virginia, and was raised by her maternal grandmother after her father's death. But there are enormous gaps in her personal documentation, and what's most intriguing, her mother, Margaret Sullivan, is not listed as deceased in civil records. According to the investigator, Margaret Sullivan mysteriously disappeared in December 2013, exactly the same month that Abigail died. She was last seen getting off a bus at Richmond Central Station, carrying only a small suitcase and a brown envelope. Witnesses reported that she seemed disturbed, talking to herself about telling the truth and no longer being able to keep the secret. From that point on, Margaret Sullivan simply vanished from the face of the earth. But the most devastating discovery is in the last pages of the report. The investigator managed to track down old records of Willow Creek Estate employees and found Margaret Sullivan's name on the payroll from 1999 to 2006. She worked as a personal assistant to Edward Morgan, Ethan's father, for 7 years. According to testimonies from retired employees, Margaret was a beautiful and intelligent woman who quickly gained the family's trust. But there were rumors, never confirmed, of an inappropriate relationship between her and the patriarch. Ethan feels the world crumbling around him as he assimilates this information. If the rumors were true, if there really was an affair between his father and Margaret, then Charlotte. The possibility that forms in his mind is both repugnant and exciting. Charlotte could be his half-sister, the bastard daughter of Edward Morgan, with an employee who was expelled from the property to cover up the scandal. The implicit incest deeply disgusts him, but also awakens in him a sick excitement that he cannot repress. Not for sexual perversion, but for the absolute emotional ruin that this revelation represents. If Charlotte is his sister, then all the feelings he has been developing for her are an aberration. And if she knows about this family connection, which seems increasingly likely, then her presence at the estate takes on the contours of an elaborate revenge or blackmail. That night, Ethan tries to distance himself from her, locking himself in his room and avoiding any contact. But Charlotte, as if sensing his anguish, knocks softly on his door at 11 o'clock. "Mr. Ethan," her voice echoes softly from outside. "I brought some tea for you. The chamomile that Miss Helen used to make when you couldn't sleep." Once again, the impossible knowledge about his childhood. Ethan opens the door in contained fury and looks her in the eyes. "Who are you really, Charlotte? And don't come to me with this story of temporary housekeeper. I know you know this house. Know my family." Charlotte remains calm in the face of his explosion, holding the teacup like a delicate shield. Her brown eyes shine with a deep sadness when she finally responds. "I am someone who should have returned a long time ago, Mr. Ethan. Someone who has a debt to the dead of this house." Charlotte's confession about having a debt to the dead of the house detonates the last barrier of control that Ethan maintained over himself. He snatches the teacup from her hands and breaks it against the wall of the corridor. The porcelain. Shards scatter on the floor like fragments of his sanity. "Debt to the dead?" he shouts, grabbing Charlotte by the arms. "What the hell does that mean? Tell me who you are now." Charlotte doesn't flinch from his grip, but she doesn't show fear either. There's a strange resignation in her eyes, as if this confrontation was inevitable and even desired. "My mother worked in this house," she says with a low but firm voice. "She used to tell me stories about the twin children who lived here, Ethan and Abigail. She said they were special, that they had a connection that went beyond normal between siblings." Ethan releases her arms as if he had touched hot iron. "Your mother, Margaret Sullivan." The name pronounced by him makes Charlotte close her eyes for a moment. When she reopens them, there are contained tears that she refuses to shed. "My mother left this house at the end of 2006. I was 7 years old and didn't understand why she cried every night. She only said that she had done something terrible, that she had betrayed the trust of good people." Ethan feels his stomach turning. His suspicion about the affair between Margaret and his father begins to be confirmed, but there are layers of complexity that he still doesn't comprehend. "And why did you come back?" he asks, trying to keep his voice under control. "If your mother left because of something terrible she did, why the hell did you come back to this house?" Charlotte moves away a few steps and leans against the wall of the corridor. The dim light from the wrought iron chandelier projects dramatic shadows on her face, making her appear older, more tired. "Because my mother has been interned in a psychiatric hospital in Charleston for 10 years, since January 2014. The date hits Ethan like a punch. January 2014, 1 month after Abigail's death. "She went crazy when she learned of Abigail's death," continues Charlotte. "She started saying things without meaning about having seen something she shouldn't have, about having kept a secret that killed an innocent person. The doctors diagnosed a severe psychotic break. She spends months silent, catatonic, but when she has episodes of lucidity, she always repeats the same name. Ethan." The name echoed by Charlotte resonates in the corridor like a death sentence. Ethan feels his legs weakening. Her crazy mother mentions him in her delusions. What did Margaret see? What secret was she keeping? And most importantly, what connection does this have with Abigail's death? "What did your mother see in this house?" he asks, but his voice comes out as a hoarse whisper. Charlotte looks at him with an intensity he has never seen before. "I don't know, but I came here to find out. My mother was a balanced, hard-working, honest woman. Whatever happened in this house was strong enough to completely destroy her mind." She takes a step toward Ethan, and he instinctively backs away. "You know what happened the night Abigail died. I see it in your eyes. I see the guilt you carry." Ethan feels the walls of the corridor closing in around him. The accusation in Charlotte's eyes is a cruel mirror of his own conscience. He always knew there was more to Abigail's death than the official report revealed. He always suspected that someone else was present on that terrible night, but the possibility that Margaret had witnessed the tragedy adds a new and terrifying dimension to his nightmares. "You're as crazy as your mother," he murmurs, trying to move away. But Charlotte follows him, relentless. "I spent years visiting my mother in the hospital, years listening to her murmur your name between tears. She doesn't speak your name with hatred, Ethan. She speaks with pain, as if she were suffering for you." The observation is devastating because it echoes something that Ethan has always felt, but never admitted. The sensation that someone else was suffering for Abigail besides him. At that moment, as if the house itself was conspiring to intensify, the drama, the lights in the corridor flicker and go out. The emergency generator takes a few seconds to kick in, leaving them in complete darkness. In the absolute darkness, Ethan feels Charlotte's breathing close to him. The soft lavender perfume she wears mixes with the air heavy with humidity and old memories. For an insane instant, he wants to touch her, to pull her against him and forget everything else. When the emergency lights finally come on, projecting a reddish and ghostly luminosity through the corridor, Ethan sees that Charlotte is crying, silent tears that she doesn't try to hide. "I didn't come here to accuse you," she says with a choked voice. I came because I need to understand what happened to my family. My mother is dying slowly in that hospital, and I know that the key to saving her is in this house." Ethan feels something breaking inside his chest. The pain in Charlotte's voice echoes his own anguish, creating a dangerous emotional bridge between them. Without thinking about what he's doing, he extends his hand and touches her face, wiping away a tear with his thumb. The contact is electric, awakening sensations that he spent years repressing. Charlotte doesn't move away. Instead, she closes her eyes and leans into his touch, as if she were thirsty for any gesture of humanity. "If I tell you what I know," whispers Ethan, "you may not be able to bear the truth." Charlotte opens her eyes and looks at him with iron determination. "I already can't bear the lie." Her answer is simple, but loaded with a courage that Ethan lost a long time ago. At that moment, with the red emergency lights creating an infernal atmosphere around them, he makes a decision that will change their lives forever. "Then come with me," he says, taking her hand. "There's a part of this house that has been locked since Abigail's death. If you want the truth about your mother, about my sister, about us, it's there. But once you know, there's no going back." Charlotte intertwines her fingers with his, with a firmness that surprises him. "I don't want to go back," she responds. "I want to move forward. Finally." Ethan guides Charlotte through the corridors of the estate, like someone conducting a lost soul through the circles of hell. Their hands are still intertwined, and he can feel her accelerated pulse through her thin, cold fingers. They climb a wooden staircase that groans under their feet, past ancestral portraits, whose eyes seem to follow every movement, until they reach double mahogany doors, sealed with chains and an old padlock. "This is the East Wing," explains Ethan, taking a Pfizer key from his pocket. "It was here that everything began, and it was here that everything ended." The padlock opens with a metallic click that echoes through the silent corridor. The chains fall to the floor with a clatter of old iron, and Ethan pushes the heavy doors. The air that escapes from the closed environment carries a smell of mold, old perfume, and something indefinable that makes Charlotte instinctively step back. Ethan turns on the lights, and Charlotte finds herself in an environment that seems frozen in time. It's a large salon with a high ceiling and enormous windows that overlook the estate's inner garden. Furniture covered by white sheets creates ghostly shapes scattered throughout the environment. But what dominates the center of the room is a black grand piano polished like a mirror, with sheet music still open on the stand. Even covered by a thin layer of dust, the instrument maintains a majestic and disturbing presence. "This is where Abigail spent most of her time," says Ethan, his voice echoing through the empty environment. "She said this piano had its own soul, that it responded to her feelings." Charlotte approaches the instrument with cautious steps, as if entering sacred territory. When she sees the open sheet music, her heart races. They are Chopin pieces, the same ones she learned to play in secret, using an old keyboard that her grandmother managed to buy when she was 12. "Your sister played Chopin?" asks Charlotte, lightly touching one of the yellowed pages. Ethan approaches, and the heat of his body close to her awakens an electric tension in the air. It was her specialty, mainly the nocturnes. She said they were like musical confessions. He stops beside Charlotte, so close that she can smell his masculine perfume mixed with the old wood smell of the room. Charlotte carefully observes the handwritten notes in the margins of the sheet music. They are technical observations, but also personal comments that reveal Abigail's personality. Play with more passion here. This passage is about loss. Remember what Mum said about expressing pain. Tears begin to form in Charlotte's eyes as she reads. It's as if she were meeting Abigail through her intimate words. She was special, murmurs Charlotte. Ethan observes her with a disturbing intensity. You speak as if you had known her. His observation makes Charlotte stop breathing for a moment. There is something in Abigail's handwritten words that awakens fragmented memories in her mind. Blurred images of a curly-haired girl playing piano, of shared laughter, of whispered secrets. But they are memories that don't make sense, because Charlotte was only 7 when she left the estate. Ethan continues to guide her through the salon, showing other objects that belong to Abigail. A bookshelf with medical books. She dreamed of being a cardiologist, an easel with an unfinished painting of the estate's garden, and in the farthest corner of the room, something that makes Charlotte stagger. An oil portrait of a small girl with curly hair and big eyes sitting on the lap of a brunette woman with a shy smile. "My God," whispers Charlotte, approaching the painting. "It's me and my mother." Ethan positions himself behind her, and his voice sounds dangerously close to her ear. "Abigail painted this picture in 2006. She said she wanted to eternalize the girls who illuminated our house. I never understood what she meant, until now." Charlotte feels her legs weakening. How could Abigail have painted a portrait of her if they never met? Or did they meet? The fragmented memories in her mind begin to reorganize into clearer images. Her and a blonde girl running through the estate's garden, the two playing piano together, 4 hands on one keyboard, whispering secrets under the main staircase, promising to be friends forever. "I remember," whispers Charlotte, touching the painting with trembling fingers. "I remember, Abigail. We used to play together when I was little. She taught me the first notes on the piano." Ethan feels the world spinning around him. If Charlotte played with Abigail, if they had a childhood friendship, then the entire structure of his suspicions needs to be rebuilt. Charlotte is not a stranger investigating his sister's death. She is someone who lost Abigail as much as he did. But the following revelation is even more devastating. Charlotte moves away from the painting and walks to an old table covered with a sheet. When she removes it, she finds letters. Dozens of letters written on pink paper with the childish calligraphy of a child. They are letters addressed to Abigail, my best friend, signed by Charlotte, who will never forget you. Ethan picks up one of the letters and reads aloud. "Dear Abigail, Mom said we're leaving the estate, but I promise I'll come back when I grow up. You will always be my heart sister. Take care of our piano until I return." The date at the end of the letter is December 2006. "You were friends," murmurs Ethan, looking at Charlotte with a mixture of understanding and horror. "Not sisters by blood, sisters by choice." Charlotte picks up another letter, and her hands are trembling so much she can barely hold it. "She answered my letters," she whispers. "For years, Abigail sent me letters telling me about life at the estate, about her studies, about you." Ethan feels as if he were putting together a macabre puzzle. "When did the letters stop coming?" he asks. Charlotte closes her eyes, making an effort to remember. "In 2013, the last letter I received was in November 2013. Abigail said she was worried about something, that she had discovered a terrible secret about the family. She said she needed to tell me in person, that it might be dangerous to write about it." The silence that follows is loaded with devastating revelations. Ethan finally understands the connection between all the pieces of the puzzle. Abigail discovered something about the affair between Edward and Margaret, something so serious that it made her contact Charlotte. And Margaret, knowing the danger, came to Richmond to protect her daughter or to reveal the truth. But she arrived too late. "Abigail arranged a meeting with your mother," says Ethan, his voice coming out like a lament. "On the night of the New Year's Eve party, she was going to tell Margaret what she had discovered, and I—" He can't finish the sentence, but Charlotte understands. Her eyes fill with tears as she whispers, "You were there. You saw what happened." Ethan moves away from her, unable to bear the weight of Charlotte's accusing gaze. "I didn't know your mother was at the estate," he says, his voice broken. "I didn't know that Abigail had arranged a meeting. I just wanted to prevent her from doing something stupid." Charlotte approaches him, and for the first time, Ethan sees in her eyes not just pain but also compassion. "What did you do, Ethan?" Charlotte's question echoes through the salon like a final judgment. Ethan moves away from her, walking to the windows that overlook the garden where everything happened. The full moon illuminates the artificial lake, transforming its surface into a black mirror that reflects terrible memories. He rests his hands on the windowsill, his shoulders trembling with the weight of a confession he has kept for more than 10 years. "I killed my sister," the words come out as a hoarse whisper, but they echo through the environment with the force of an explosion. Charlotte feels the air escaping from her lungs, even suspecting, even preparing for this revelation. Hearing it pronounced is like taking a stab. "It wasn't an accident," continues Ethan, still with his back to her. "I pushed her. She fell into. The water hit her head on the stone edge of the lake. She died instantly." Charlotte leans on the table of letters, her weak legs threatening not to support her. "Why?" she manages to murmur. The simple question carries the weight of years of pain, of mystery, of a mother gone mad in a psychiatric hospital. Ethan closes his eyes, and when he reopens them, there are tears he hasn't shed in a decade. "Because I discovered what she was doing," his voice is a guttural lament. "That night, after the party, I saw her sneaking out of the house. I followed her to the garden. She was waiting for someone at the gazebo near the lake. When I saw it was your mother, I became even more intrigued. Abigail never mentioned that she maintained contact with former employees." Ethan turns to face Charlotte, and what she sees in his eyes is a pain so deep that for a moment she forgets her own anguish. "I hid behind the trees and listened to the conversation between them. Your mother was desperate, begging Abigail not to tell what she had discovered. She said it would destroy the entire family, that some truths were too dangerous." Charlotte feels her heart racing. "What truth?" Ethan runs his hands through his hair, completely undoing the always impeccable hairstyle. "Abigail discovered that our father didn't die of a heart attack, as everyone thought. She found medical documents hidden in his office. Edward Morgan was poisoned, and the main suspect was someone from the house itself." The shock of the revelation leaves Charlotte momentarily mute. Murder. The word resonates in her mind like a funeral bell. "My mother?" she manages to ask. Ethan shakes his head. Not directly, but she knew who it was. She saw, and she kept the secret for years until Abigail discovered the truth and sought her out. Ethan approaches Charlotte, and she can see that he is reliving that terrible night with every word. "Your mother begged Abigail to forget what she had discovered, said that revealing the truth wouldn't bring our father back, but would destroy innocent people. Abigail refused. She said she had the right to know who murdered our father, and that she would take the evidence to the police. And then?" Charlotte can barely articulate the words. "Then I came out of hiding," Ethan confesses, his voice choked. "I was completely distressed. My father murdered, my sister investigating alone, a former employee with secrets. I yelled at both of them, demanded that Abigail tell me everything immediately." Ethan stops speaking, lost in the memory of that night. Charlotte observes him struggling with internal demons that she is just beginning to understand. "Abigail refused to speak in front of your mother. She said it was something that only concerned the two of us. Your mother tried to leave, but I stopped her. I wanted answers." "That's when everything went downhill," he continues, his voice getting lower and lower. "Abigail became furious with me for having followed her, for having intimidated your mother. We started to argue. I had never seen my sister so upset. She screamed that I had always been controlling, that I never let her have her own life, that even our parents were hostages to my temperament." Charlotte feels a painful pang of understanding. She is seeing Ethan not as the cold and calculating man she met, but as a desperate brother trying to protect his family in the only way he knew. "The argument escalated," Ethan continues. "Abigail said she was leaving the estate, that she couldn't stand living under my control anymore, that she was going to move to Richmond, study medicine away from me, and that before leaving she was going to hand over the evidence of our father's murder to the police, even if it destroyed our family." "I completely lost control," the confession comes out like a sob. "I grabbed her arm, tried to prevent her from leaving. She broke free and ran toward the house. I ran after her. When I reached her at the edge of the lake, I held her by the shoulders and screamed that she couldn't abandon me, that we were family, that we needed to stay together." The silence that follows is laden with horror. Charlotte can visualize the scene. Two twin siblings at the edge of a lake, an argument that became violent, a moment of loss of control that changed everything forever. "Abigail tried to break free," Ethan continues, tears finally rolling down his face. "She said she loved me, but that she could no longer live being my shadow, that she needed to discover who she was away from me. And I couldn't accept it. I pushed her, not to hurt her, but to make her stop trying to leave. She staggered backward, tripped on the stone edge of the lake. I heard the sound of her head hitting the stone, the most terrible sound I've ever heard in my life. Ethan collapses into an old armchair, his body bent by the weight of guilt. When I ran to help her, it was already too late. Abigail was in the water, motionless, with blood spreading around her head. Your mother was screaming. In total shock, she saw everything. Charlotte feels the world spinning around her. Her mother witnessed the brother killing his own sister. That's what drove her insane. Your mother helped me get Abigail out of the water, Ethan continues, his voice broken. We tried resuscitation, but it didn't work. Margaret was in panic, repeating that it was her fault, that if she hadn't told about our father's murder, none of this would have happened. Charlotte finally understands the extent of the tragedy. Everyone blamed themselves for Abigail's death. I begged your mother not to tell anyone that it had been an accident during an argument. She agreed, in exchange for one thing, that I would forever forget the investigation into my father's death, that I would let the dead rest in peace. Ethan raises his eyes to Charlotte, and in them there is a desperate plea for understanding. Your mother left that same night. I organized everything to make it look like an isolated accident. I bribed people, altered evidence, but Margaret couldn't bear the weight of the secret. A month later, I learned that she had gone insane. Charlotte feels a simultaneous hatred and compassion for Ethan. He destroyed 2 families trying to protect a third. Now you know everything, Ethan whispers. I am a murderer. I killed the only person I truly loved in this world, and I destroyed your mother's mind in the process. Charlotte observes him in silence for long minutes, processing the confession. When she finally speaks, her voice is surprisingly calm. And who killed your father, Ethan? Because this story isn't over yet. Charlotte's question about who killed Edward Morgan hangs in the air like a sharp blade. Ethan raises his head, his red eyes fixed on her, and for the first time since he began his confession, shows hesitation. That's the part I could never accept, he murmurs. The part that tormented me as much as Abigail's death. Charlotte approaches him slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. You know who it was. It's not a question, it's a statement. Ethan clenches his fists, the knuckles whitened by tension. Abigail found the medical documents hidden in our father's office safe, toxicological exams that were never officially presented, alternative reports that were suppressed. Edward was poisoned with digitalis for weeks. Digitalis, Charlotte frowns. It's a heart medication. In controlled doses, it's a medicine. In high doses, it causes the same symptoms as a fulminant heart attack. Ethan rises from the armchair and walks to a dusty bookshelf from which he retrieves a dark wooden box. His hands tremble as he opens it, revealing yellowed documents and old photographs. Abigail was a medical student. She recognized the signs when she found these papers. Ethan hands a medical report to Charlotte. She reads quickly, but the technical words scramble before her eyes. What she understands is devastating. Edward Morgan was systematically poisoned for months before he died. Who had daily access to him? She asks, already fearing the answer. Our mother, Ethan whispers. Helen. Morgan. She controlled his medication, prepared his meals, took care of his health. She had total and unrestricted access. The name echoes through the salon like a blasphemy. Charlotte feels her stomach turning. His mother murdered her own husband. Why didn't Abigail take this directly to the police? Ethan takes a photograph from the box. In the image, Helen Morgan appears smiling next to Edward and the twin children, a seemingly perfect family. Because our mother died 6 months after our father, fulminant pancreatic cancer, Abigail thought there was no sense in destroying the memory of a woman who had already paid the ultimate price. Charlotte observes the photograph, trying to reconcile the image of the loving mother with that of a calculating assassin. But there was more, Ethan continues, his voice getting lower and lower. Abigail discovered the reason for the murder. She found letters, documents, evidence of an extramarital affair that lasted for years. Charlotte feels her heart racing. An affair with whom? Ethan looks her in the eyes, and in them there is a pain that transcends the guilt for his sisters, death. With your mother, Charlotte? Edward betrayed Helen for years with Margaret, your mother. The shock is so great that Charlotte needs to lean against the wall to keep from falling. My mother and your father. The revelation completely reorganizes her understanding of the events. Helen discovered the affair and poisoned her husband for revenge? She manages to ask. Ethan shakes his head. It wasn't just revenge. Helen discovered that Edward was planning to leave her to be with Margaret. He was going to divide the family's assets, give half of everything to an employee. My mother never told me, Charlotte whispers, her legs weak. Ethan approaches her, and for the first time, his gaze shows genuine compassion. Margaret tried to end the relationship several times. The letters Abigail found prove this. Your mother knew the affair was destroying a family, that it was putting you in danger too. Charlotte begins to understand the complexity of the tragedy that destroyed two families. Helen killed her husband to prevent him from abandoning everything. For my mother, she murmurs, and my mother left the estate because she felt guilty about his death. Ethan confirms with a nod. Margaret never knew that Edward was murdered. She believed he died of a natural heart attack shortly after she ended the relationship. Guilt consumed her. That's why she went crazy when she learned of Abigail's death. Charlotte connects the final pieces of the puzzle. She believed she was being punished for having indirectly caused Edward's death. And when Abigail died too, Ethan completes the reasoning. She saw a pattern of destruction that began with the extramarital affair. In her fragile mind, everything was a consequence of her actions. The silence that follows is as heavy as lead. Charlotte and Ethan are face to face with the complete truth. Two families destroyed by a love triangle that ended in murder, accidental death, and madness. Now you understand why I became what I am, Ethan says, his voice choked. I grew up believing my parents had a perfect marriage. I discovered that everything was a lie, that my mother was a murderer, that my father betrayed the family, and I became worse than all of them. I killed my own sister. Charlotte observes him for long minutes, seeing no longer the cold and calculating man who received her at the estate, but a lost boy who never managed to process the betrayal of everyone he loved. Slowly, she extends her hand and touches his face. Ethan initially shrinks as if her touch burned him, but then surrenders to the contact. You're not worse than them, Charlotte whispers. You were a desperate brother trying to protect Abigail, in the only way you knew. What happened was an accident during an argument. It wasn't premeditated like your father's poisoning. Ethan closes his eyes, and hot tears wet Charlotte's hand. That doesn't bring Abigail back. It doesn't restore sanity to your mother. No, Charlotte agrees, but perhaps we can honor their memory in a different way. Ethan opens his eyes, intrigued. What do you mean? Charlotte picks up one of the letters that Abigail wrote to her as a child. Abigail wanted to be a doctor to save lives. My mother raised me to be strong and independent, even after everything she went through. Maybe we can use this pain for something constructive. Ethan observes her with a new intensity, as if seeing Charlotte for the first time. You don't hate me. The realization comes out as a whisper of astonishment. You should hate me. I destroyed your family. Charlotte shakes her head. Our family was already destroyed even before we met. But perhaps we can build something new on these ruins. The moment that follows is charged with a different tension, no longer the tension of fear or guilt, but something more primitive and dangerous. Ethan and Charlotte are very close, their breaths mixing in the air heavy with history and tragedy. They are the only survivors of a war that began before they were born, united by pain and mutual understanding of irreparable losses. Charlotte, Ethan whispers her name like a prayer. If we stay together, it will be on this foundation, on death, guilt, secrets. There's nothing romantic or pure in this. Charlotte looks him in the eyes, and in them he sees a determination that he recognizes as similar to his own. I didn't come here looking for a fairy tale, Ethan. I came looking for the truth. And now that I've found it, I won't run from it, or from you. Charlotte's words echo through the salon like a simultaneous promise and threat. Ethan observes her with a mixture of desire and terror, as if she were simultaneously his salvation and his condemnation. The air between them is charged with a dangerous electricity, built on layers of pain, truth, and an attraction that defies all moral rules they both know. "You don't understand what you're saying," Ethan murmurs, but his voice lacks conviction. He moves closer to Charlotte, and she can see that he is fighting against impulses that go beyond reason. "I am a destroyed man, Charlotte. I carry my sister's death on my hands, your mother's madness on my conscience. I have nothing good to offer you." Charlotte doesn't retreat. Instead, she takes a step toward him, eliminating the last space between them. "I also carry deaths, Ethan. My mother is dying slowly in that hospital because of secrets she kept to protect people who don't even exist anymore. My childhood died when she went insane. My innocence died when I discovered that our friendship with Abigail was built on lies and family betrayals." Ethan smells her lavender perfume, now mixed with the scent of salty tears and old dust. There is something devastatingly beautiful in the way Charlotte accepts the destruction of their lives as an accomplished fact, without self-pity or drama. "If we're going to destroy ourselves, let it be together," she whispers, touching his chest over his heart. "If we're going to carry guilt, let it be shared." Her touch awakens something fierce in Ethan. He grabs Charlotte's wrists, not with violence but with a desperate urgency. "This isn't love, Charlotte. It's obsession born from tragedy. It's two broken people trying to complete themselves with carting pieces." She looks at him without blinking. "And what's wrong with that? At least it's honest, at least it's real." Her brutal sincerity breaks Ethan's last resistance. He pulls Charlotte against him and kisses her with a hunger that has been repressed since the day she touched Abigail's reliquary. It's a violent, desperate kiss that tastes more of war than romance. Charlotte responds with the same intensity, as if she were trying to devour all his pains and make them her own. When they separate, both are breathless. Ethan rests his forehead on hers, and their voices mix in hoarse whispers. "This will destroy us," he murmurs. "I know," Charlotte responds, "but maybe that's the only way we can rebuild ourselves." There's a bitter wisdom in her words that Ethan recognizes as similar to his own cynical philosophy about love. At that moment, as if the estate itself was conspiring to seal their fate, a typical Virginia autumn storm explodes over the property. Lightning illuminates the windows of the salon, creating dramatic shadows that dance on the walls. The noise of heavy rain on the roof drowns out any sound from the outside world, completely isolating them in their bubble of devastating truths and forbidden desires. "You know something?" Charlotte says, moving away slightly to look him in the eyes. "Abigail wrote about you in her last letters to me. She said you were afraid to live because you were afraid to lose, that you controlled everything around you because it was the only way you found to feel safe." Ethan feels as if she were reading his soul through the words of his dead sister. "Did she say anything else?" he asks, his voice choked. Charlotte smiles with a heartbreaking sadness. "She said you were the most loyal person in the world, but that your loyalty had transformed into a prison for both of you, that she needed to free herself from you to be able to truly love you." Abigail's words, filtered through Charlotte, hit Ethan like an absolution he never knew he needed. "I never knew how to let her go," Ethan confesses. "Since we were born, we were a unit, Ethan and Abigail, as if we were a single person. When she began to become independent, when she wanted to have her own life, her own secrets, I panicked." Charlotte touches his face with a delicacy that contrasts with the emotional brutality of the moment. "And now?" she asks. "Now can you let me go if I want?" The question is a test, and they both know it. Ethan observes her for long seconds, weighing his words. "I can try," he finally responds, "but it won't be easy. I'm already obsessed with you, Charlotte. I'm already addicted to the way you're not afraid of me." Charlotte smiles, and for the first time since arriving at the estate, it's a truly happy smile. "Then let's make a deal," she proposes. "Let's try to build something real between us, but without prisons, without control. If one day I want to leave, you let me. If one day you want me to leave, I'll go." Ethan feels a shiver of pure fear. Her proposal goes against all his instincts of control and possession. "And if I can't?" he asks honestly. "And if my demons are stronger than my will to change?" Charlotte approaches him again, and this time it's she who kisses him. It's a softer kiss than the previous one, but loaded with dangerous promises. "Then I'll teach you," she whispers against his lips. "I'll teach you that loving is different from possessing." Ethan feels something moving in his chest, something he hasn't felt in more than 10 years. It's not exactly hope. It's something more complex and terrifying. It's the possibility of redemption through the very person who should hate him most in the world. "Why don't you hate me, Charlotte?" he asks again. But this time it's not rhetorical. He really needs to understand. "Because hatred is just wounded love," she responds. "And I loved Abigail, I loved my mother. And now I'm beginning to love you. Not the man you became to protect yourself from pain, but the boy who lost his twin sister and never learned to deal with the loss." Her answer is devastatingly simple and profound. They spend the rest of the night in the forbidden salon, among Abigail's memories and the ghosts of their destroyed families. They talk about impossible plans, about transforming the estate into a rehabilitation center for people with family traumas, about using the Morgan fortune to help families like Charlotte's, about honoring Abigail's memory through constructive actions instead of self-destruction. They are plans born of pain and guilt, but also of the hope that two broken people can heal each other. When the sun finally rises over the Blue Ridge Mountains, Ethan and Charlotte are sleeping embraced on the old sofa, surrounded by love letters from two children who never imagined that their destinies would be so tragically intertwined. It's the first peaceful sleep Ethan has had in 10 years. The months that follow the night of the confession transform Willow Creek Estate from a mausoleum into a place of rebirth. Charlotte doesn't return to her room at the back of the property. She moves to the guest room on the main floor, a symbolic decision that marks her transition from temporary employee to Ethan's companion in his journey of redemption. But the change is neither simple nor romantic. It's punctuated by shared nightmares, panic attacks, and moments when guilt threatens to suffocate them. Ethan discovers that loving Charlotte is different from the sick obsession he felt for Abigail. With his sister, love was possessive, controlling, born from the fear of abandonment. With Charlotte, love grows through shared vulnerability. She doesn't allow him to control her, but she also doesn't run away when he has his darkest moments. Instead, she holds his hand while he relives the night of Abigail's death, forces him to talk about his fears instead of repressing them. But Charlotte also has her own demons to face. 3 times a week she visits Margaret at the psychiatric hospital in Charleston, a 5-hour journey that she makes religiously. Ethan offers to accompany her the first time, but Charlotte refuses. "She needs to see me alone first," she explains. "She needs to understand that I survived, that I'm okay before she can process the rest." The visits are devastating and hopeful at the same time. Margaret has increasingly frequent moments of lucidity, especially after Charlotte begins to bring photos of the estate, old letters from Abigail, objects that awaken happy memories instead of traumatic ones. During one of these visits, Margaret finally manages to form complete sentences. "My girl has grown up. My girl has come home." It's during one of these return trips from Charleston that Charlotte finally tells Ethan about her most difficult decision. "I want to tell my mother about us," she says, looking at the road unfolding before them. "About what we discovered, about our plans for the estate, but mainly about how we found a form of love that doesn't destroy." Ethan feels the steering wheel slipping in his sweaty hands. "Are you sure? This could make her regress." Charlotte shakes her head, or it could completely free her. She's stuck in a loop of guilt about the past. Maybe knowing that something good was born from all this tragedy will help her forgive herself. The conversation with Margaret happens on a July morning, when the Virginia winter covers the gardens of the hospital with a blanket of fog. Charlotte holds her mother's hand as she tells her everything, about Ethan, about the truth of Abigail's death, about the plans they have to transform the estate into a place of healing. Margaret listens in silence, her eyes fixed on her daughters. "Fez?" When Charlotte finishes, Margaret remains quiet for long minutes. Then, with a clearer voice than she's had in years, she says, Abigail appears to me in dreams sometimes. She always says the same thing, that true love is that which heals old wounds, not that which creates new wounds. Charlotte feels tears rolling down her face. Did she say anything else? Margaret smiles, and for the first time in a decade, it's a genuine smile. She said she's proud of both of you. From that day on, Margaret's recovery accelerates drastically. She begins to participate in therapy sessions with a lucidity that impresses the doctors. She talks about the guilt she carried, about the affair with Edward, about having witnessed Abigail's death. But mainly she talks about forgiveness, to herself and to everyone involved in the family tragedy. Meanwhile, at the estate, Ethan and Charlotte begin to put their transformation plans into practice. They hire a team of architects specialized in therapeutic spaces to remodel the property. The East Wing, where the secrets were revealed, becomes the heart of the project, an art therapy center where people with family traumas can express themselves through music, painting, and writing. Abigail's piano, after months of silence, sounds again. Charlotte, who had secretly learned piano in her adolescence, plays the sheet music that Abigail left. Ethan, reluctantly at first, begins to play again too. They discover that playing together is a way to honor Abigail without getting lost in the pain of her absence. But not everything is smooth transformation. There are moments when Ethan returns to his old patterns of control, especially when Charlotte begins to work directly with other survivors of family traumas. The possibility of her finding purpose outside of him awakens his deepest fears of abandonment. During one of these crises, he even locks her in the room, begging her not to leave the estate that day. Charlotte doesn't scream or despair. Instead, she sits on the floor next to the locked door and begins to talk to him through the wood. "Ethan, do you remember our agreement about love without prisons?" Her voice is calm but firm. "I won't leave because you freed me, but if you imprison me, I'll leave because you betrayed me." The words hit Ethan like a cold shower. He opens the door immediately, finding Charlotte still sitting on the floor, her eyes sad but not angry. "I'm sorry," he whispers, kneeling beside her. "I still have so much fear." Charlotte hugs him, and he can feel that she is trembling too. "I'm afraid too," she admits. "Afraid that you'll get tired of working so hard to be different. Afraid that one day you'll wake up and realize you can have an easier life without me." The mutual admission of fear brings them even closer. They realize that true love isn't the absence of fear, but the daily choice to trust each other despite the fears. It's a lesson they need to relearn constantly, especially when the pressure of transforming their lives into something constructive becomes overwhelming. The first group of patients arrives at the estate in September, when the Virginia spring begins to awaken the gardens from their long winter sleep. They are 8 people of varying ages, all carrying different family traumas. A woman who lost her daughter due to medical negligence, a man whose father committed suicide after a financial scandal, a teenager who survived years of domestic abuse. Seeing these people for the first time is devastating and liberating for Ethan and Charlotte. Devastating because each story echoes aspects of their own tragedies. Liberating because they realize they are not alone in their journey of transforming pain into purpose. "We are all survivors," Charlotte says to Ethan that first night, after the patients retire to their remodeled rooms on the estate. "But now we are survivors with a mission." Ethan observes her as she organizes the activities for the next day and feels something he hasn't experienced since childhood: genuine pride. Not possessive or controlling pride, but the pride of seeing someone he loves grow and flourish. Charlotte is no longer the haunted young woman who arrived at the estate with 2 suitcases and secrets. She has become a healer, using her own wounds to help others heal. "I love you," he says suddenly, the words coming out without planning. Charlotte stops writing and looks at him, a slow smile forming on her lips. "I know," she responds, "and I love you too. But the most important thing is that we're learning to love each other in a way that doesn't hurt." Ethan approaches her and kisses her forehead, a simple gesture that carries the weight of a promise renewed daily, to choose love that heals instead of love that destroys. 2 years after the night when all the secrets came to light, Willow Creek Estate resonates with a different symphony. The sound of the piano is no longer melancholic, it's hopeful. Voices of people in therapy mix with the singing of birds in the remodeled gardens. The lake where Abigail died has been transformed into a living memorial, an aquatic garden with medicinal plants and a small gazebo where patients do meditation and reflection sessions. Charlotte, now 25, has developed her own methodology of therapy through art, combining music, painting, and writing to help survivors of family traumas. Her master's thesis in psychology, which she studies at UVA while administering the center, is based entirely on the work developed at the estate. The title is a discreet homage to her lost friend, Harmony After Dissonance: How Art Therapy Can Transform Family Traumas into Life Purpose. Ethan, at 34, discovered that his true vocation wasn't in the family business, but in the administration of social projects. He created a foundation that replicates the Willow Creek estate model in other regions of the United States, always with the care to adapt each project to local needs. But most importantly, he learned to delegate, to trust teams, to lead without controlling. The change wasn't easy. He still has occasional relapses, but Charlotte is always there to remind him that growing is a process, not a single event. The most significant moment of transformation happens on a December morning in 2026, exactly 13 years after Abigail's death. Charlotte wakes up early and finds Ethan sitting at the piano in the main room, playing a melody she has never heard before. It's not Chopin or any known classic, it's an original composition, melancholic but not sad, nostalgic but not desperate. "Is it for her?" Charlotte asks, approaching the piano. Ethan continues playing as he responds, "It's for all of them, for Abigail, for your mother, for my mother, for all the women who were destroyed by the secrets of this family. But it's also for you, for us, for the possibility that love can be different." Charlotte sits beside him on the piano bench and places her hands on the keys, creating a harmony that complements his melody. It's the first time they can play together without Abigail's ghost hovering between them. That same day, they receive a call that changes everything again. Margaret, who had been discharged from the psychiatric hospital 6 months earlier and was living in a rest home near the estate, asks to speak with both of them. When they arrive at the rest home, they find her sitting in the garden, more lucid and present than she has been in 15 years. "I want to come home," she says, surprising both of them. "Not to West Virginia, to the estate. I want to work at the therapy center." Charlotte feels her heart racing. "Mom, are you sure? That place has many painful memories for you." Margaret smiles, and in that smile there is a peace that Charlotte hasn't seen since childhood. "That's exactly why, my daughter. I need to transform those memories into something useful. I need to help other people not to commit the same mistakes I made." Margaret's proposal forces them to confront a new level of healing. Ethan, initially resistant to the idea, realizes that his reluctance comes from the fear that her presence will awaken old patterns of behavior. But Charlotte helps him understand that running from the past isn't the same as overcoming it. "My mother is part of our history," she explains. "If we truly want to build a future free of secrets, we need to include her in it." Margaret's transition back to the estate is carefully planned. She begins working just a few hours a day, helping in the kitchen and the gardens. But she soon demonstrates a natural talent for talking with the patients, especially with mothers, who arrive carrying guilt for traumas that involve their children. Her own experience with madness and recovery becomes a powerful tool of empathy and healing. The real test of the new family dynamic happens when Margaret finally visits Abigail's memorial in the aquatic garden. Charlotte and Ethan accompany her, the three walking in silence to the gazebo built on the exact spot where Abigail died. Margaret kneels at the edge of the water and whispers, "Forgive me, girl. Forgive me for not being strong enough to protect you and your family from the secrets I kept." Ethan, who was prepared to emotionally lose control at this moment, surprises himself by remaining calm. "She forgave you a long time ago, Margaret," he says, using her name for the first time in 15 years. "And I forgive you too. We all made mistakes trying to protect those we loved. The difference is that now we know how to do it in a healthier way." The moment of mutual forgiveness marks the beginning of a new phase for all of them. Margaret officially becomes part of the therapeutic team. Ethan finalizes his studies in NGO management, and Charlotte defends her thesis with a presentation that moves the entire examining board. But most importantly, they learn to be a family, not a traditional family, but a chosen family, built on honesty, forgiveness, and shared purpose. The marriage proposal happens in a completely anticlimactic and perfect way at the same time. It's an April night in 2027, and they are lying on the grass in the garden, observing the stars after a particularly challenging day with a patient in crisis. "Do you want to marry me?" Ethan suddenly asks, without ceremony or exaggerated romanticism. Not because it's what's expected, not because we want children or a conventional life, but because we chose to build something together every day, and I want to make that choice official. Charlotte laughs, a genuine laugh that echoes through the starry night. "That was the worst and best marriage proposal in history," she responds. "And yes, I want to marry you, for the same crooked and honest reasons you just gave." They marry 3 months later, in a simple ceremony at the gazebo memorial, with Margaret as witness and the patients of the center as guests. It's a celebration of love built on ruins, of hope born from tragedy. The epilogue of their lives happens 5 years later, when the Abigail Morgan Therapeutic Center becomes a national reference in the treatment of family traumas. Charlotte, now a doctor in psychology and mother of a 2-year-old girl who carries her grandmother's name, Margaret Helen, publishes a book about art therapy methodologies that becomes required reading in universities across the country. Ethan, who never imagined being a father, discovers that paternity teaches him a final lesson about love without control. Observing his daughter grow with freedom, curiosity, and emotional security heals wounds that he didn't even know he still carried. "She will have the childhood that we didn't have," he says to Charlotte one morning as they watch little Margaret. Helen run through the gardens of the estate. Margaret, now 62 and completely recovered, has become one of the most respected therapists at the center. Her specialty is helping families overcome secrets that destroy them from the inside out. "Secrets are like poison," she often says to patients. "The longer they are kept, the more toxic they become. But when exposed to the light of truth and forgiveness, they lose the power to destroy." On the main wall of the center, there is a black and white photograph, Ethan at 17 sitting at the piano next to Abigail. But beside that photo, there is another, colored and recent. Ethan, Charlotte, and Margaret playing piano with 6 hands, smiling at the camera, with little Margaret Helen on Charlotte's lap. It's an image that perfectly represents the philosophy that governs their lives. The past cannot be changed, but it can be transformed into a source of wisdom and compassion. Every night before sleeping, Ethan still hears the sound of the wind in the estate's trees, and for a moment thinks of Abigail. But it's no longer a memory that paralyzes him with pain. It's a silent conversation with a sister he finally learned to love without possessing, to honor without destroying himself. And beside him, Charlotte sleeps peacefully, knowing that together they built something that their destroyed families never managed to achieve. A love that heals instead of hurting, that builds instead of demolishing, that liberates instead of imprisoning. They proved that even from the most devastating